Hey guys, so today's video is actually for those of you studying, specifically those of you studying law. And while I am a professional acrobat and acrobatic and fitness coach, I also studied law for many years. Am technically still studying to now become a lawyer, just on the side as just a hobby of mine and passion, because I am passionate about the law and about being able to help people who don't know their rights. And so basically I actually studied my undergraduate law degree with Monash University. It was a Bachelor of Arts Law many years ago in Australia. And then at the same time, I went to live in Japan ended up being for 4 years. And I was doing my master's in criminal law and I wrote my thesis. Everything was in Japanese. So I had to do that law degree, the master's in criminal law in Japanese. So I spent many, many years studying, many years in libraries. I still study, bit of a nerd like that. But I think that you can only grow as a person when you're studying, learning new things, no matter what it is. It's great because your mind is a muscle. The brain is a muscle, and you want to be able to train the brain to absorb information quickly, effectively, and to retain that information and to be able to apply it in any given circumstance. And that is with any area of your life. And so I'm a huge fan of studying and training, obviously, but both. And yeah, so with my law degrees, I spent many years studying for those. I did very well. And I then stopped for quite a while to pursue my circus career, my acrobatic professional career, which I love, still performing to this day. And coaching as well, absolutely love coaching people, helping bring out the best in people. But I did take a long break from studying. So it was actually quite difficult to get back into studying law. So I decided last year that I just wanted to become a lawyer to help people on the side, whether it was part-time or just to have it, just to finish that off, because I like to finish what I started, and I did start that a long time ago. And I found, obviously, because the brain is a muscle and it takes time to retrain it if you're not using it. Like, obviously, I was still studying things, but it's not the same. You've got assignments, you've got deadlines, presentations, everything like that. You have to be able to read often boring information as well as interesting, but a lot of it can be quite dry. And you need to be able to apply the law to any sort of given fact or situation and do that under time, when you've got pressure, when it's an exam, whether it's an oral exam or a written exam. So I've had to sort of relearn that as a mature age student, because when I started, when I did all my law degrees, I was young. I think started at 19. And now I'm still very young, not as young as I was then, but I'm actually way more focused now. When I was at uni, and I was 19, they had parties, they had barbecues, you were sitting in these long lectures and your mind would just wander. And I used to spend all weekend sort of sitting there trying to study, but I was actually being really unproductive. I was also not really training much at the time either, which really made a big difference. And my diet was terrible. I just ate whatever, sugar highs and then crashes, couldn't focus. So even if I sat there trying to study for about 8 hours, and I would literally try, I'd be like, okay, that's it, I'm just going to study all weekend. Really, out of those 8 hours, maybe one was good. And this time round, because I had to refresh my undergraduate degree, which I did over the last 6 months, and because that expires. After 5 years, your law degree in Australia technically expires and you have to refresh the 4 core units, or depending on how long it had been since you graduated. It had been over 15 years for me. I'm now 42. And so to refresh the degree, I had to redo the 4 core units. But this time I was working full-time and coaching, so I was performing from 2 shows every night. We have trainings throughout the day at La Pearl, and I love my job, obviously. And I coach as well in the mornings, many classes, clients, things like that. So for me, and I get home at about 11:20 at night. So it was difficult. I thought, well, like, how am I going to fit this in? How am I going to be productive? You know, because you're obviously quite tired. You're performing 2 shows, you're running around, you're training 5-6 hours a day, every day, and that's physically demanding. But I found that because I had less time, I was more productive. So even 30 minutes here and there throughout the day, when I had a break at work, I would try and get at least an hour or two of uninterrupted, solid, focused study done most days, and that made a big difference. And one thing I did differently this time around to when I studied law the first 2 times around, was I would set these unrealistic goals. And I find this can be the same with training, actually. If you think, okay, today I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do 10 hours of solid work, subconsciously you can actually psych yourself out. And it's the same if you go into a training session, whether it's gym or acrobatic or whatever, and you think, I'm going to smash out 3 hard hours of this, and it's like you think, oh my God, subconsciously, how am I going to get through this? It can actually have a negative effect. So I always like to sort of semi-trick myself and think, I'm just gonna do a light session, just a little bit, and see how I go. And then before you know it, hours have passed and you've gotten into the flow. But I try not to put an insane amount of pressure on myself this time around, which I really found made a big difference, because when you're stressed, you don't retain information properly. When you're trying to study and you're stressed, it won't go in, and it's really not productive. So I find that making sure you're getting a good night's sleep, very, very important, at least 8 hours. Then you can absorb the information. I tried to do the staying up late. I used to do all-nighters with assignments. I would leave things till the last minute when I was doing law the first 2 times around. It was always a last minute, the assignment's due and I haven't started. This time around, remembering that, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start really early and just make sure I'm doing 30 minutes here and there throughout the day, or at least an hour and a half. An hour and a half over 5-6 days a week, that's 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. You know, it accumulates. It has an accumulative effect, which is extremely important. So even if you think, oh, I only did 30 minutes of studying, and then you put all this stress and pressure on yourself, and you feel like you've let yourself down, you can't think like that, because even 30 minutes over 4 days that's still 2 hours, which is more than 80%, more than what 80% of people will actually do when they're studying. I mean, I know when I was at uni, I definitely wasn't doing 4 hours of quality studying a week. I was doing way more hours than that, but it wasn't quality. I wasn't actually retaining the information, because when I went to do it the second time around, when I had to refresh my undergraduate degree this time around, I was like, with some of the subjects, I was like, yes, I remember all of this. And there were some subjects where I was like, it's like I'm learning it for the first time. I don't remember any of this, but I did really well at the time. So obviously I crammed. I was good at cramming. I had a very good sort of last-minute stress memory, if you want to call it that, but it doesn't stay in. The information doesn't stay in. So this time around, it was like, it's like I never did it. So this time around, I actually took the time to really understand the concepts, to be able to apply the law. So and this time around, and I know a lot of people will not approve of me saying this, I actually didn't do a lot of the reading. I did very little reading. Obviously, you had to do the reading for assignments, but for the exams, I didn't do that much textbook reading or case law reading. I did a lot of that when I was studying the first time round, years back. I would spend hours reading case law, and again, it's verbose. The way they write the sentences, it just goes on and on. For one sentence can be like a whole paragraph. It can be quite dry, and it's very easy to read something, and without even realizing it, your mind has actually wandered off, and you're not actually retaining the concepts of what the judges are talking about in their judgments of the cases. So this time around, I was like, I just really want to understand the law really clearly, reapply it to the facts in a situation, analyze the facts, make sure I've reread everything, make sure your introduction briefly ties back to, discusses the topic at hand, whether that's law or anything, but you want to make sure you're clearly identifying the issue at hand, and what you're going to talk about or how you're going to approach the issue. Then in the body of the essay, whether it was an exam or an assignment, obviously for assignments you have time, so I did do a lot more research and reading, whereas for exams it's quick. You can't get carried away writing long answers because you will run out of time and lose a lot of marks later on in your exams. So that's a whole other discussion, basically, exam technique and exam skill. So when you want to take an exam, you need to not only understand the principles, be able to apply them to the facts in whether it's law or another subject, but then you also need to be able to do it under time. You know, if you have 2 hours and you've got however many questions, and you also want to see how much each question is worth. So one question might be only worth 5 marks, one question might be worth 15 marks. Don't spend too long on the 5-mark question when you have a 15-mark one. So if you feel like you're running out of time and you do need to watch the clock throughout your exams, you want to sort of skim down and go, okay, basically do a rough answer. You can always go back and fix it if you've got more time, and go to the next question. Even if you're unsure of what you wrote, you might only lose a few marks if you kind of applied the wrong law. You weren't sure whether this was, you know, what the issue, what the relevant law should be with regards to this issue. You want to sort of move down to the next question and start trying to answer that, because you'll definitely get at least a few points for showing that you understand the concept or the laws, the relevant law in question, that you've applied it to the facts, the relevant cases. So even though I didn't read the case law, just to backtrack quickly, I still knew the cases, and the notes are really important as well. And less is more when it comes to your exam notes. So for law exams, or for in Australian law, it's open book, which sounds like it's going to be really easy, but you actually have no time to do any reading. If you're flicking through your notes like this for a while reading, in the middle of the exam, you're in big trouble. There's no time, because they're complicated questions and you have to quickly apply the relevant case, the relevant law, your application and your interpretation of the law, and what you think the judgment will be with regards to that case, or the case in question in the exam or the assignment. So it's very important that your notes are concise, that you do understand the cases, and they do talk about this. So I did listen to all of the lectures, so I had to do the refresh online. So I was able to, you know, they gave us notes as well. The lecturers will always give you notes. If they're not detailed enough, you do need to spend a bit of time to sort of do a little bit of research, go through, you know, read anything you're uncertain about and make your own notes. But don't have these long lecture notes as part of your exam notes, because I have made that mistake before, and you will just get lost. You know, you'll be trying to find something and it's just all this writing, and you just you won't even know where to start, and you'll run out of time. So it's important to have concise, clean notes with just dot points, the relevant cases under that topic, and the relevant law, if there's a statute involved, say what the law is, then say, oh, in this case, Justice whatever said this, and but in this case it was overruled, or so based on the facts of this case in this exam, but don't write in this exam, but based on the facts at hand, my conclusion is that, or I think that. So you're basically giving your judgment, your assessment based on the facts, based on your application of the law and the relevant case law in question, and how you think the judge will rule. And even if you're wrong, or even if the judge or the examiner would go, no, I disagree with that, but I can see her reasoning or his reasoning. They've stated all the facts. They've stated the relevant law. They've stated the relevant statute, the relevant cases, and then they've come to an assessment based on these, and you'll still get really good marks even if they disagree with what you've written, as long as you show your understanding of the law and that you can apply the law. Then you sum it up in a brief conclusion, and that's how you do really well. Even without reading all of the case law, you still need to understand it. You don't have to know all the cases off the top of your head. I mean, when you're at law school, they don't expect you to memorize it's good to, know a few of the key cases, but you'll be learning so many cases at law school that there's no time. It's not possible to remember every single one to detail. I mean, great if you can, especially if it's an oral exam, if you have to do, like a mock trial, which we did as well. But then even then you get to prepare and you get to make notes. So, and you can quickly refer to your notes and you know what you're talking about before the mock trial begins. So then it doesn't really matter whether you've actually, and then you'll learn the cases anyway by doing that, but you won't know all of them. And it doesn't matter if you don't know all of them, as long as you understand the application and you can cite the relevant case when necessary and the relevant law. And that's how you do really well. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but that's the brief rundown of what I did and still do when I'm studying. I've now refreshed my university bachelor degree. The master's degree didn't expire, but because it was done in Japan, I don't even know if that's recognized in Australia, but in Japan it is, master's in criminal law. But again, if I want to go on to practice law in Australia or anywhere else using my Australian qualifications, which I would like to at some point in my life, I really would. So I will then need to, now that I've refreshed my undergraduate degree, I will need to do the further study. And that will start soon when I decide to do it, which I've decided to do it at some point in the next few months. I'm going to start that journey again. It is a lot more time that I need to dedicate within my week to studying, and I have a lot of other things that I'm working on the side. I'm also love studying about business, and there's many other things and all my coaching endeavors. But there's always time. And yes, you can take on too much, but if you're smart and productive and good at compartmentalizing what you need to do and assessing the important tasks consistently, you don't have to do 5 hours a day, but if you're doing an hour or two here and there a day, if you can, throughout the week, every day. If you can do an hour a day, every day, that's 7 hours a week. If you can do 2 hours a day, that's 14 hours a week. Obviously, on your days off, you can do more. But even then, anything more than, I think, around the 4-hour mark is when you start to daydream. You're not really that productive. So I also recommend exercising, get the endorphins up, drinking a lot of water, sleeping. Being healthy in general makes a huge difference to your brain. Not drinking alcohol, because I noticed that when I stopped drinking, even just 1 or 2 drinks, it really does affect your memory retention, and your ability to think sharply and clearly. So I noticed as soon as I just made a real effort to just be extremely clean with what I was eating and not drinking rubbish, not drinking sugary drinks either, I do have coffee, not too much, although today I had 3 scoops, but it's still just 1 instant coffee, it's not that strong, but just enough to sort of wake you up, but to keep you level-headed so you're not a little bit too scattered. You want to be focused, you want to be able to retain anything that you're reading, anything that you're studying or learning, and you want to be able to apply that later. So you need to sort of get to that right headspace, and a lot of that comes from your nutrition, your sleep, making sure you're exercising, and just your general well-being is very important and really tied into your brain development, your cognitive your memory retention, everything. So if you can start making these little changes as a student, whether you're a mature age student like me, a never-ending mature age student, tongue-tied, or you're a new student, either way, these things make a difference. So try to dial in and focus on what's important. Quality over quantity. Consistency, that's the number one, being consistent. Don't study for 1 hour a week, a little bit every day. Be consistent, whether that's with your training or your studying, everything, it's all connected. And you will notice the results. You will notice that you'll start to get really good grades. You'll actually understand the concepts. You'll be able to apply the relevant law, and you will do really well. You can't not. And I really thought I would do much worse this time round because I was already so busy with all of the other things I had going on, and I was working full time. I wasn't living at home, getting my meals cooked, whatever. I had to do everything myself. And I did, I think, better this time round. I mean, I did well the first time round, but it was stressful. And I remember always being really stressed before exams and really feeling unprepared, even though I'd spent hours of time. Like, I would just sit there and study all week in the week before exams. And it was painful. And I used to get the worst back pain from sitting down studying. Honestly, you need to move, you need to stretch, you need to train. Break it up throughout the day. You'll be sharp for an hour or two, and then you will start to daydream. So do an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3 hours if you can stay focused like that. And then if you find that you're starting to not be that productive, if you're starting to daydream or you're thinking about what you want to eat, or take a break and then get back to it later. And you'll notice that you'll actually retain and understand the information, and you'll do much better. Hope that was helpful. See you later.